All right, ladies and gents. As always, we love to bring on authors here on the podcast and send you to books to read. And this is a book that I think the world has been anticipating for several years. I know I have been. Ian O'Connor, Out of the Darkness, The Mystery of Aaron Rodgers is the author. He has been making the rounds, and it's a pleasure and an honor to have you here, Ian. I've admired you from afar for a long time, whether it's your column writing, your book writing. Obviously, your Bill Belichick book is a must read for everybody as well. But Aaron Rodgers is an individual that we've talked about from time to time here at Go Long and back to Bleacher Report and the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. So you have gotten to know Aaron Rodgers at a deeper level than myself, my pal Bob McGinn at our other podcast, Tom Silverstein, who I covered the beat with. So many of us have kind of had our own experiences with Aaron and people around Aaron, and when you write a book, I mean, you are just diving headfirst into that world and talking to as many people as you possibly can. So I can't wait to hear all about the reporting process on Out of the Darkness, which everybody out there can purchase wherever you find your books. But Ian, let's just start there. Like, what compelled you to write a book about, let's face it, one of the most polarizing athletes of our time?
For starters, Tyler, I've been a big fan of yours for a long time, and you're clearly one of the best writers in the country and now podcasters. And I I want to respect your institutional knowledge of the Packers and Aaron Rodgers first, because that's important. I actually don't agree with your statement. I still think you and the other people you mentioned, McGinn, of course, Boone, and a couple others have a great institutional knowledge of the subject that I just profiled in a book. I was an outsider, a complete outsider who looked at Rodgers from afar in the New York market, was fascinated by him for a number of years, but I was not qualified to, and I feel this way about all my biographies that are unauthorized. I really was not qualified to do the project at the start of it. And hopefully my process makes me qualified to do it. And so I totally respect your institutional knowledge. You're going to be asking me questions you already know the answers to. But yeah, I mean, Rodgers was always on my radar as an intriguing figure. And strangely enough, Vince Lombardi coached at my high school. And when I played football at St. Cecilia's High School in Englewood, New Jersey, the Lombardi legacy actually was still with us, because he made St. Cecilia the #1 high school team in the country. We were certainly not that, but that name meant a lot to us. And Lombardi lived 8 houses away from the house I grew up in. And so the Packers meant a lot to me. And I always wanted to do a Packers book of some sort before I was done. And then Aaron got traded into my backyard at the time. I was just getting started on a LeBron James bio. And I just thought it was too enticing. You have this all-time great player with only 1 ring, and he's partnering with this Loserville franchise in the biggest. He's going from the smallest market in the NFL to the biggest market, and trying to dramatically enhance his legacy by winning a ring with the Charlie Brown franchise of the NFL, the Jets. And I just thought it was a great opportunity to pivot to him, to get my Packers fix, and also just write about who I thought was a very compelling figure. And that's why I took the project on.
Where my brain went, the second I heard that Ian O'Connor was writing the Aaron Rodgers biography, I'm thinking, okay, Aaron throughout his career has been obsessed with controlling the narrative, and he has done that in ways we see, in ways we don't necessarily see. And so you're an independent sports writer, not in that inner circle, not a quote unquote ally or a surrogate, or maybe somebody that Aaron would handpick. Yeah, I'm sure he would love to, like, okay, this is who I want to write my story, my book. You're a professional who's done this on a lot of different figures. So when you make this decision and you start entering that world, did you experience any pushback from Aaron or people close to him? How was that kind of received by him when he found out you were doing this book?
Well, I always think it's important, Tyler, to let the subject know directly from you that you're doing an unauthorized biography on his or her life. I've done that with Jeter, with Belichick, Coach K, where if I couldn't get directly to the subject, I went to his PR person. And I want you to hear this from me first, because I think that's just the best way to do it. So I did that with Aaron after his introductory press conference with the Jets after the trade. He did about 37 interviews that day. He must have been wiped out by the time I got to him. And it was just 3 minutes. And I said, hey, I'm doing this. Here's my process. Basically, I'm calling everyone who's ever met you or trying to, or has had a role in your life and career. And if you have any questions about that process, just let me know. And he said, yeah, I have a question. Do you plan on interviewing me for this book? I said, well, I would love to, but that's entirely up to you. So he kind of smirked and he didn't commit to anything. And obviously, it's unauthorized, so he doesn't owe me a damn thing. No editorial control. He's not getting any money from it. Not that he needs the money. Certainly the kind I make, he doesn't need. So so I didn't know what to expect. Early on, it was clear I got more non-returned calls and messages than I even did with Belichick. And I really think that, and I got this from one of his good friends later, they looked at me as, okay, you're a New York media guy, you're probably a liberal, and you're probably looking to destroy Aaron in this book over his vaccine stance and other things. And really, nothing could be further from the truth. I had no agenda whatsoever. I was agenda free, and I try to be really with every project I take on. And so I think over time they realized that, and I won some of those people over, and I think they were texting Aaron and saying, this guy seems legit. He seems like he's going to do the good and the bad and everything in between. And I also think that when he realized I was fascinated by the military service of his grandfather, who was an amazing combat pilot in World War II, and I was going to open the book with that story, that piqued his interest and maybe sent a signal that he should talk to me. So I don't know why it took so long, but I did meet a lot of resistance early on. First of all, nothing but indifference from him. I did not get any response through the Jets, through his agent David Dunn, directly to Aaron. I sent him my Coach K and Belichick books, and I just got nothing from him. So I don't know if I wore him down or his friends worked on him, but ultimately he did sit down with me in Malibu and made it a better book.
It's fascinating. Yeah, and I just love that approach too. And I think that we were talking about Jeff Pearlman before hitting record and in his books. Like he doesn't necessarily need to talk to Bo Jackson, but there's 700, 800 interviews out there where you can learn stuff about Bo Jackson that Bo doesn't even know. And so when you just hurl yourself into the subject, and that's honestly how I kind of went about writing stories on Aaron Rodgers. Now, we used to have a really good relationship at the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, sitting down for an hour each spring, kind of previewing the season, getting into life, football. And then I came back to the Buffalo News, went to Bleacher Report, wrote a story in 2016 that touched on the split with his family, which I'm sure we'll get into, and then the divorce with Mike McCarthy a few years later. So, yeah, I'm not sure if Aaron is sitting down with myself in Malibu, but if he wants to have me in Malibu for an interview, if he's listening, Aaron, at any day, anytime, we can make it happen. But what was that like? So when you're there with Aaron Rodgers, you had a couple hours. I imagine there's a million things you'd love to ask him. You'd love to have 15, 20 hours, but you've got to get to the nitty gritty. You've got to get to it fast, and you can't piss him off too much, or else he might just show you the door.
Right. And you really were at the forefront of informing this book. You were the first person, I think, to write about the estrangement on any level. And your reports on him and the relationship with McCarthy and where it went, I think, was excellent. And I cited in the book and very, very well sourced. And if Aaron has a problem with it, well, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. So when I went out to Malibu, I actually flew from Newark, New Jersey to Los Angeles. There was a bomb scare on my plane. So we were
Wow.
diverted to Chicago. Yeah, that wasn't a
Holy
fun
shit.
experience. And I even texted my wife. I didn't know what was going on at the time, but just in case, hey, I love you, that sort of thing. I didn't think we were going to die, but we came in hot. And I remember seeing at O'Hare, the emergency vehicles with their lights. When you see that, you don't know. And the pilot didn't tell us what the problem was. He just said, we have an issue on board. And he didn't say medical issue because then, as much as you would hate for somebody to be in distress, that's a medical issue involving one person probably on the plane. They said, we have an issue. We have to land this plane. And so you see the emergency lights and you're like, and it felt like we were coming in hot. So I thought maybe the landing gear wasn't working and we were bracing for a crash. But that didn't happen. There was no bomb on the plane. 7 hours later, we actually got back on the same plane and flew to LA and landed safely, thankfully. I drove to Malibu. I was afraid I'd miss the interview, frankly. And he's got a beautiful home right on the ocean. His backyard is the Pacific Ocean. It just was stunning. And so we sat there, and again, I didn't know if I had 25 minutes, 45 minutes. I didn't know what it was going to be. So I had to prioritize the questioning because I really, for full cooperation, I would have needed 15 to 20 hours with him. And I knew it wasn't going to be that. But I thought maybe 45 minutes, an hour. And so I had to throw some questions overboard and just focus on, and I said this to him, if I get something wrong that's positive in this book, you're not going to care. But if I get something wrong that's negative, you will care. So this is going to be mostly negative. And he agreed to engage on the family estrangement, which is now unfortunately running up on 10 years. And his COVID stance and how he screwed that up, the way he handled it publicly in 21. He engaged on that, and really anything. I think what was important was before we got going, I said to him, or at least before we got going on the estrangement, do we need to have a debate whether or not I should be writing about the estrangement? In other words, as a biographer, do you understand that I have no choice but to write about this? I'm writing about not only your career, but your life. And as you know, Tyler, he's a well-read guy. He's read a ton of biographies, so I thought he got it, but I wasn't sure. So if we need to have that conversation first, let's have it. And he said, no, I understand. As a biographer, it would make no sense for you not to include this part of my life. Great. Okay, so then I can ask you about it. And I did. And some things he discussed on the record, other things he didn't want to talk about for public consumption. But I would say he was thoughtful, he was candid, he was engaging, and he didn't owe me a damn thing. So he made it a better book, and I definitely appreciated that.
Let's go to that family estrangement then, because man, when I first heard that in 2016, my jaw just about hit the floor. You know, people that were a part of that inner circle who are no longer part of that inner circle. It was the Christmas presents sent back. It was, you know, not going to a close friend's wedding that he went to college with, not attending a grandfather's funeral, if I remember correctly. There was a whole host of things in a short amount of time. Olivia Munn being kind of central to it all. I believe that's what the family believed was central to the estrangement.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you get into this, and I've heard some interviews you've done down these lines. But man, it's been a decade, like you said. And I think I'm just getting into the book now, and thank you again for the copy. We'll get through it. But I have listened to some interviews you've done on this book tour, and there's that scene where Aaron sees his dad at the golf tournament, and it's emotional, it's special, and they share a hug. You can recreate that if you'd like, but it didn't really like mend everything. I guess my question for you is Aaron Rodgers justified in completely cutting off family?
Think
From what you know on and off the record.
Yeah. Okay. I would say from the outside looking in and having researched his life and talking to his parents and other relatives, his maternal aunts, who were a fairly big part of his childhood, I talked to them as well. I would say no, it's not justified. And since he has now said he wants to have a relationship with his father, I think he realizes that. And his close friend, Jordan Russell, was probably his best friend. He was exiled from Aaron's life for 3, 4 years too. And Aaron brought him back. And I have a chapter titled The Island, and that's where Aaron puts you when you're out of his life. And it's a cold and lonely and distant place.
Yeah.
And if you end up talking to somebody on the island, you're going to be the next one there. But Jordan
applies
Russell,
to media as well.
That's right. That's absolutely right. He's not the first person I've met who's like this. Derek Jeter didn't do that with family members, but with friends, if you crossed him, you were done. You were dead to him. So, but Aaron's done it obviously with family members. He brought Jordan Russell back into his life. He called him one day out of the blue. I think Jordan was at the airport. And he said, I'm not just walking back into your life. I demand your respect. And I think they resolved it. But he had a quote in the book where he said, if you're not mission aligned with Aaron, his mission being an all-time great, if you're a distraction or a hurdle in his path, he will permanently remove you. and he's a master of his craft. And if you're just not aligned with his pursuits, he's going to knock you out of the way, whether you're a family member or not. And that's basically what's happened. But he asked the question, does the punishment, meaning 10 years, fit the crime? His answer is no. And I think he's expressed that to Aaron, and I know he has. And so Aaron's trying to figure out how to end this thing. And I, there were some family members who told me that they think he would end it if he could figure out how to. It's almost like it's a hard thing to confront this living organism that is the estrangement. It's easier to just let it linger, but confronting it is hard, and then killing it off. How do I do that? And so hopefully this scene I have that you mentioned at Lake Tahoe last summer where he hugs his dad, Ed Rodgers, the father, is crying. It is strange that there was no follow-up, particularly since Aaron says in the book, I want to have a relationship with my father. Okay, well then why don't you have a relationship with your father? They both say it. And so I think that will happen sooner than later. I don't know. There might have been some recent electronic communication between the two. So it was a baby step last summer. There should be more follow through now. And as you know, when he won the Super Bowl after the 2010 season, the family was on the field celebrating with him. All the estranged members of the family, his grandmother, I talked to her, or at least via email, his parents, his two siblings, his brothers, they were all on the field with confetti around celebrating with him. Ideally, the happy ending to the story is Aaron winning a second ring with the Jets and having his family on the field again to celebrate. I don't know if that's possible, but I hope it happens.
I think you just put it perfect, Ian. I mean, like everything that I've ever heard about Aaron Rodgers is exactly that. Like if you cannot benefit his pursuit of being the absolute best quarterback he can possibly be, you're out, right? Like a runaway freight train, and it's moving one direction. And everything that I know about the situation, man, I get it. Families can be complicated. Just what I know, it sounds like you kind of have the same takeaway. It's not justified. Like I can't think of one smoking gun, one incident, one thing that happened that comes close to justifying the severing of ties with family that he had been obviously really close with in the past. So it
Yeah,
is
and you know,
fascinating.
he was upset with Jordan going on The Bachelorette,
Yeah.
sort of in Aaron's mind, using the estrangement to further his TV career. And also the two empty chairs, he said, I wasn't even invited to the filming. So if you're going to embarrass me and Olivia with the two empty chairs, at least invite us to the seat. Now, he wouldn't have gone, but that was a point he made. He also brought up some things that I thought were, he was upset his older brother Luke went on this Fuel TV series called Clean Break, and which was a breakaway from your life for an exotic adventure in Hawaii. And he was upset that he did that because Aaron had been generous with him. It was almost like the implication was he was breaking away from Aaron. And that to me seemed like a very minor thing, and maybe a slight that didn't even exist. And the wedding, as you reported, you were the first to report. I followed up on it, and that to me was absurd too. It's okay, it's your college roommate and teammate's wedding. It's his day. You agreed to be in the wedding party. And then right before the wedding, now different sources said it was the day before, the night before, the morning of. He said it wasn't that close to the event. However, you were in his wedding party, and he happened to be a friend of your family as well. So he invited your family. You got to rise above your issues and do it for your friend. It's his day. It's not your day. Not every day revolves around you. And I told him, and I think I was trying to be as honest as possible. I said, listen, I am criticizing you in the book for that particular thing. I'm going to hit your brothers for hitting you on social media after you gave victims of the campfire $1 million, basically to strangers. That's not a bad thing. And they tried to make it a bad thing because you didn't check on your parents during the fires. And I said, I'm hitting them on that, but I'm going to hit you on this. And if you want to talk about it, let's talk about it. But I thought you needed to be at that wedding, and you don't do that to your buddy. And he said, well, I respect your opinion, but it's a wrong opinion, and you're uneducated to the complexity of the situation. And my wife got a real kick out of that when I told her that, because she's told me that many times in our marriage, that I was uneducated to the complexity of some other situation. So, yeah, but it got a little tense at times, and that's fine. It's a sparring session, but it was healthy, and it was a good give and take. And but I wanted him to know I'm hitting you on that. if you want to talk about it, maybe you'll change my mind. And he didn't change my mind. So
Maybe he's a combination of just stubborn and afraid, right? He doesn't want to confront being wrong about the situation, whatever precipitated that split. We'll see what happens. I mean, and it had to have been wild for you, Ian, to kind of be in the middle of this all. I mean, you drove to that Jets opener with his parents. So
mhm.
you're talking to them about their son, who, by the way, they've bought tickets to see on StubHub as far back as 2016, right? Like they're still going to the games. They still want to be a part of his life. It's their son. I mean, it's a love that only a parent knows. And now you're writing this book on their son. You're kind of this potential bridge between the two parties. Was that strange for you to kind of be thrust into that role?
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, Tyler, it was the least enjoyable chapter to write. And who wants to be in the middle of a family feud, right? I come from a big Irish Catholic family. We've had our share of issues. This is an extreme case. And actually, I would say 9 out of 10 people, when I told them I was doing this book, that was the first question they asked. What's the deal with his family?
Oh,
And
I know.
it's like this,
Dime
because
every
I think
time.
most people have family issues, right? I hopefully you don't, but I have some, so they can kind of relate to it, and they're fascinated by it because here's this very public figure who has maybe it makes him more relatable in a sense. On the other hand, his estrangement is just off the charts. It's gone on too long, 10 years, and it's with everybody. Now he does talk to an uncle, I think you know this, his uncle Chuck, and he does talk to a couple of cousins, so it's not a complete estrangement, but it is close to it. And yeah, it was weird. I have to say that I hoped in some strange way, as a human being and as a father, and not as a journalist or an author, I that this book might help. I really didn't want it to hurt the process of reconciliation, but I do think that it was on a path to last forever. So maybe the book would change the dynamic and it would put it out there in the public arena even more than your reports and a couple of others, that it would somehow blow up the dynamic and lead to reconciliation. And I guess I still hope that happens. If it hurt the possibility of that, that would really bother me just as a human being. But to be in the middle of it and to drive them to that 9/11 game last September, and I remember we pull into the parking lot of MetLife Stadium. I did warn them. I said, listen, this is not Lambeau Field. This is one of the least aesthetically pleasing stadiums in the NFL, if not the least. And Lambeau, of course, is just, if you've ever been there, I know you have a million times. I've been there, I don't know, 5 or 6 times. And of course, as a Lombardi guy at St. Cecilia's, it was just magical to be there. But they'd been there a lot. And to go to MetLife Stadium, it is a come down. But I remember in the parking lot before the game, Aaron was on a billboard in the distance, I believe for Zenith watches. And his mother was sort of straining to see it. Is that him? Is that him? And it just got me as a parent thinking, what would it be like if my son did not talk to me for 10 years? I just couldn't fathom that. And we talked about, do you still get nervous before games? And they both said yes, Ed and Darla. And Darla said, he's the quarterback, which means he's got a target on his back and the whole defense is after him. So I always worry about injury. What happens 4 snaps into the game or on the Jet side of the ball? He's done for the year. They're sitting at the 25-yard line, about 30 rows up, wearing Jets gear, and nobody has any idea who they are except me. And
Wow.
but they're right with the Jets fans, and nobody knows this is Aaron Rodgers' parents sitting among us. So I now have to drive them home. So when the injury happens, I got texts from friends who were worried about the book. The book might be dead, uh, and I couldn't even think about the book. I was so heartsick for the fan base, for the parents, and really for Aaron that happened. It was such a summer-long love fest. To see that just ripped away after 4 snaps was that was tough to take. Then I had to drive his parents home. That was a surreal experience. But yeah, that was it was weird to be in the middle of that. It was troubling as a father, and yeah, so I hope against hope that things do ultimately work out for that family.
It is bad. I mean, we could talk about that for hours. It is why. So he said he would be open to a relationship with his dad, but not his mom, not his brothers. It just the dad is what he kind of referenced.
I think he listen. His dad. Tyler, I think you know this, was his idol when he was in college.
Oh yeah.
Joe Montana and Steve Young were his idols in football context. But he said, my idol is my father. I want to be my dad." So his dad taught him football. His dad was a very good college football player as an offensive lineman in Division II at Chico State. Who was probably a Division I talent and played semi-pro ball and taught the game to Aaron and his other sons. So he's got the closest relationship, or had the closest relationship, I think, with his father. And that's not to say he can't repair it with his mother. I think she is very devoutly religious. Aaron rebelled against that. He's now, as you know, non-religious. He's spiritual. And the estrangement, religion was a part of it early. Now, I've been criticized in some corners by not coming up with the one reason for the estrangement. And that's because there are like 15 reasons for it. And a lot of them don't seem to be very good ones. So, and that's fine. I've been a critic for 36 years, so I accept it. But it was a tough thing to get to the core of. Religion was a part of it early on, but not so much now. Aaron even told me that. He said it's not a big part of it now. The parents also told me for the book that religion is a non-issue. If Aaron doesn't want to be religious at all, we don't care. We just want the relationship again, and let's hope it happens.
No, I'm with you. I never could really pinpoint the one incident, one instance either. I think it comes down to I can't ever picture Aaron Rodgers saying I'm sorry, apologizing. I don't think he is capable of saying that to his family for the last 10 years.
No, I don't think so. I said to the parents, do you need to relitigate the issues to have reconciliation? Because if you need that, it's not happening. Aaron is not doing that, and he's not going to say, "I'm sorry." I think what needs to happen is just resume the relationship and just don't talk about the issues. Just go forward and be happier together again as a family. And I think they agreed with that. They said we don't need to solve
Man.
the problems that existed and go over them, because if you try to do that, forget it. It's not going to work. And Ed and Darla both said they're willing to we just want the relationship and just move forward and be happy we're a family again. And I think that's a very smart approach to take. And I'm sure Aaron at some point will read the book and maybe see those words and realize that that's an opportunity to end this.
So we talked a lot about family and you touched on the religion there. I want to ask you this question, Ian. When it comes to Aaron Rodgers, I've always wondered this, like when he steps away from football, when he's not on a field looking at film, like what is his foundation in life? You know what I mean? Like a lot of people have family, when we're going through something, we can lean on a loved one, a child, a dad, like somebody close. And a lot of people have religion. I believe like Mita Kimes wrote a feature story a few years back on what you touched on there too, on just kind of veering off of religion, being more spiritual. Like, what is Aaron Rodgers' foundation in life away from football? Because on the outside, it's, you see trips to Egypt and ayahuasca and going on, podcasts with Pat McAfee and Aubrey Marcus to talk about dumps. He's out there. He does a lot of different things, but is there a foundation that he kind of leans back? I don't know what that is. For a long time, I thought it was kind of what people thought about him. He seems to care deeply about how he's perceived and tries to kind of play whack-a-mole with narratives and headlines. And he'd go on McAfee and push back against the smallest of small things that I think every other starting quarterback in the NFL wouldn't give a shit about. And that I don't know, it seemed like that was his foundation, caring what people think about him. But I mean, you know him as well as anybody right now after writing this book. What do you think that is?
I still think he very much cares about what people say about him, write about him, no question about it. And he's admitted a couple of times that he's human. He gets hurt by criticism. He tries to. It almost seems like in recent years he's leaned into that villainous role that he's been assigned since saying those 4 words. Yeah, I've been immunized, and that changed everything about him. He hasn't recovered from that. But if you look at it, he's estranged from the family he grew up with. He doesn't have his own family, right? So everything about his day when he wakes up, and you have kids, right?
Yep, 2 kids.
Tyler. Yeah. So when you wake up, it's the most fundamental change in your life when you became a father, is like your first thought is not about yourself. Your first thought is about your children, right?
Right.
So he's never experienced that. So everything that he sees and does is sort of through the prism of how it impacts him. And there are family members who told me that they thought if he was a father, that this estrangement might have ended because he would never be able to conceive of a time when I wouldn't be able to talk to my children. And so he does have a strong network of friends that haven't been exiled, including one who was, Jordan Russell, that are very loyal to him. A couple that he grew up with in Oregon when he spent his junior high years in Oregon. And they're people who flew across the country to be at his 40th birthday party in Manhattan last year. And I talked to many of these people, and they just seemed like very good, balanced human beings who are good friends, and they talk about how great Aaron is with their children and the acts of kindness and generosity that never get publicized. And I think what is sort of at the center of his post-playing universe right now, his plan is to be a father. So I assume that marriage is part of that, although he didn't say that to me, but he wants to be a dad badly. And it seems, despite his relationship now or non-relationship with his own father and family, that he would be a very good one. I'll say a friend of his, Steve Levy, who played with him at Cal and lives right near me here in New Jersey, sent me a recent photo of Aaron hanging out at his house with his children. And Aaron looked like the dad in the picture. And like I've seen other snapshots of Aaron with other people's kids, and he's like off the charts good with them. You probably know this story. Randall Cobb has told it. He repeated it to me that he flew across the country from California to Nashville, I believe, to attend Randall Cobb's son's 3-year-old birthday party. And he said, how many people would ever do that? Never mind Aaron Rodgers, a superstar in American sports. So I think he's got that network of friends. And I think right now that sort of is at the core of his life. And I think the next stage of his life and what he's looking to do is become a father, and a really good one, regardless of the state of his relationship with the family he grew up with. So I think he'll do that. I also think ultimately he'll be the one of the best network analysts we've ever seen, because as you know, when he's talking football, he's mesmerizing. And even though he hasn't expressed really interest in doing that, I think that's the natural post-playing path for him. And I think he'll be one of the best ever to do that. When he's talking football, and yeah, and, you know, the amazing thing is the Jets being the Jets. Last year, they got all the downside of employing Aaron Rodgers and none of the upside. That's the Jets right there in a nutshell. And hopefully this year they get the upside. And that when you get the upside, it sort of diminishes the downside a little bit, because he's talking more about football and he's playing high level football, and the other stuff, the conspiracy theories, the feud with Jimmy Kimmel, which got ugly, and everything else kind of gets pushed into the background. Oh, that's why we care about this human being, because he's a first ballot Hall of Famer and he's really, really good at something that's very difficult to do.
And that's why Green Bay, Green Bay, Brian Gutekunst, Matt LaFleur, Mark Murphy, I can't imagine the stories they could tell. I mean, they know a lot more about Aaron Rodgers than we'll ever know, but they were willing to put up with anything and everything, and sure, hold us hostage for, 3.5 months and come on back and have a 30-minute press conference, just absolutely shredding the way we do business because you're an MVP quarterback. And so it was worth it for all of them involved. They gave him the new contract, and then it became not worth it. And Jordan Love got better, and they ripped the Band-Aid off. And I'm sure you have all of the details in your book that people can check out. But that's, gosh, he is so fascinating. And people should read this book because there are shades of empathy, shades of narcissism. I mean, pick a personality trait, and he probably has it, right? That's kind of what makes him so compelling.
Yeah, I was concerned a little bit, particularly last year, as the controversies off the field mounted, that he would get so unlikable that people would not want to buy this book. But sometimes people buy books about figures they can't stand because they want to find out, why is he the way he is, right? Why do I hate this guy? So I have this in the book. There was an NFL official, a longtime official, who told me the story that he said, and this guy has been around the league and knows players on every roster, hundreds upon hundreds of players. And he said, I basically hate Aaron Rodgers and everything he stands for, even though I don't know him personally. I hate what I know about him. but I've never, and I have to admit this, I've never met an NFL player who doesn't like him. Now, I guess he hasn't met Greg Jennings and Jermichael Finley, who obviously have said some negative things to you and others over the years. They've also said some positive things, but I think that was surprising in my research and going back to really high school through junior college, Cal, and then the Packers and the Jets is that I thought I was going to get more negativity about him as a leader and a teammate than I got. It was, it wasn't 100% positive, but his teammates had an awful lot of good things to say about him. And I have to say, I was a little surprised by that. And so there's a lot of goodness there. It's not all bad. And so what I try to do with these books, and I know you, in your enterprise pieces as well, and you're one of the best really ever to do it, is you paint a portrait and you let the reader decide. I don't want to tell you he's a good guy, a bad guy, or something in between. I want you to decide. So that's what I tried to do with this book, like I've done with my other bios. I don't want to make that decision for you. So I tried to paint as complete a portrait as possible and then let the reader decide.
Man, that's the best way to do it. Gosh, and even the vaccine thing, it feels like it was light years ago. I do wonder, like, if he doesn't get COVID, like, we just assume that he was vaccinated. I think that's kind of what my problem was, and a lot of people's problem is when he wasn't Kirk Cousins, Lamar Jackson, Carson. There are a lot of players who wore that scarlet letter, and they, like, if that's hell, I know a lot of people who did not want to get the shot, right? And especially with what we have learned since then about COVID, we don't have to turn this into a COVID podcast, right? That's a quick way to alienate half the people. But I said it at the time. I didn't give a shit if Aaron Rodgers was vaccinated, not vaccinated, whatever. Like, take whatever you want. Take ivermectin. I know people who have. It helped them immensely. I just didn't like it was so misleading and manipulative, and he knew what he was doing. And if he just have never gotten COVID, he was A-okay with people thinking he was vaccinated. Man, if you feel that strongly about it, like, have that conversation, put it out there. And it wasn't until he was kind of caught red-handed with it all. So I don't know, but it sounds like he didn't really own up to that aspect of it, right? He was more the way I don't want to put words in your mouth, but he more so told you that people kind of interpreted it the wrong way, or how did that
Well,
conversation go?
so it was as much of a concession, I think, that you'll ever get out of a person like Aaron Rodgers. Like I said to him, and by the way, he also said in that press conference when asked about unvaccinated players, yeah, I'm not going to judge those guys, right? I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he said, acted as if he was a vaccinated guy and he wasn't going to judge unvaccinated people while he was unvaccinated. So I got a little bit of a kick out of that. But the way I presented it to him was I was vaccinated at the time, but I was trying to be as open minded as possible. And I was. I knew unvaccinated people. I didn't hate them for that. So I made my decision. I also understand as a journalist, as an author, my decision is a little different from a professional athlete trying to compete at the highest level. Who every decision about his body is critical. I do understand the difference there. So but I said I'm vaccinated. I'm a columnist in New York, but if I were a columnist for a Milwaukee or Green Bay outlet, sitting in the room that day in August of 21, and you told your truth at the time. Now, remember what his truth was. He was allergic to an ingredient in Pfizer and Moderna and concerned about Johnson & Johnson side effects. So why didn't you just say that? Because if you said that, I would have found that to be a somewhat reasonable position. Maybe not everybody. I can't guarantee this, but I don't think I would have ripped you in my column that day. And you would have gotten, I think, half or less than half the criticism you ended up getting in November when the truth came out. And he said, yeah, I should have told the truth, my truth. And I made a mistake. And this is how he put it. He said, because I gave my critics something they still have on me today. And the one thing they really have on me, I gave it to them. So that was the context in which he made that concession. People have pointed that out. He wasn't really sorry. He was sorry that he gave his critics ammunition to then attack him with. And boy, did they attack him with it. And
Right.
his image has never recovered from that, and maybe rightfully so, depending on your perspective. He's also added to that with conspiracy theories on podcasts. The Jimmy Kimmel thing was so unnecessary, and he created that with his words, being reckless with his words. So that's his fault. And he had to live with the fallout of that. And so I do think a championship in New York for that franchise, I think would wipe away a lot of that. I understand, Tyler, that victory isn't the same thing as virtue, but we know how it works in sports when you win a championship and end a drought in the biggest market in the league. That is going to wipe away a lot of this stuff. And I think that's really a reason why he picked the Jets to get traded too. Now, I don't know if you agree with this. If his 5 hour meeting, and I want your opinion on this, if you don't mind, if his 5 hour meeting with the Jets in Malibu went sideways, Woody said some stupid things. And do you think if he opened it up for business, that other NFL teams would have been interested? David Dunn got the word out. Okay, Aaron's not going to the Jets, but he wants to leave Green Bay. Are you interested? Do you think teams would have jumped in?
I think so. I'm trying to remember who was even in the market for a quarterback at that time, but there had to have been a team out there dying for a 4-time MVP, who's going to put cans in the seat, all of that. I mean, I get it. There's all of this other stuff, but hey, there's a lot that Aaron Rodgers says on podcasts that I find fascinating, that I agree with. And I think that teams would look past all of that stuff because he is still 1 year at that time, 1 year removed from, having a team seeded number one in the NFC, winning an MVP. Now, things did kind of go sideways and he looked old and slow and not as mobile. And I think that the strength of Aaron Rodgers was walking up to the line of scrimmage and having tens of thousands of reps baked in with Randall Cobb, Jordy Nelson, Greg Jennings, Devontae Adams famously, and just operating off a feel, right? Like maybe running the offense, but it's more so his offense, what he wants to do. And you don't even have to audible with Devontae Adams because you see the same thing and just react. And so you'd have to like place that kind of quarterback into the right offense. That's why I was really skeptical about the Jets thing last year. Yeah, I guess he's had some more practice time since then, and he looks pretty good from what we've seen at training camp, but I'm still kind of skeptical this year. I don't know, though. I feel like name recognition, what he could do marketing wise, I don't know who the team would have been, but I think so. I think there would have been
Yeah,
several teams.
that's what I thought, but I had others tell me there really wasn't so much interest around the league, and
Wow.
particularly the way he looked at the end in Green Bay in 22. He looked like a diminished athlete. And I don't know he had the thumb, right? And that definitely impacted him. But he had a game to win there to make the playoffs, and he performed the way he did, and he did look diminished. I have to admit that. And I've even had people point to the 3 or 4 snaps he had as a New York Jet. He looked kind of slow and nervous, and so it'll be fascinating. When the league put out the schedule and I saw the Jets opening in San Francisco, I was like, "Are you trying to get him hurt again?" I mean, what kind of an opener is that for Aaron Rodgers after what
Right.
happened last
Right.
year? My goodness, against that defense on the road. Wow, I understand the storyline. They didn't draft him. That was his childhood team, the whole thing. But he's 0-4 against them in the playoffs. In the regular season, I think he's 6-3. So it's been a mixed bag against the 49ers, but I just don't want him opening against that defense. My book needs him playing this year throughout. I actually think he'll have a pretty good year, not an MVP year. I don't think he's capable of that anymore. But can he be the ninth best quarterback in the NFL? I think so. I think he'd be a top 10 guy at the back end of that. And he's got a really good running back. He's got a really good wide receiver, maybe two. He's got an improved offensive line. Of course, it all comes down to health. They've got a very good defense. The Bills probably are down a little bit, and I could see them winning that division, but the Jets being the Jets, it's just hard to buy in, just given the history of that franchise.
Right. It's just a demonic presence that will rear its head at some point, right? We don't know how, but it will. Uh, Ian
It sure
O'Connor,
will.
this was phenomenal. Kept you way longer than anticipated, but that was really informative, insightful, and everybody out there make a point to pick up Out of the Darkness, the mystery of Aaron Rodgers. It's right there over Ian's shoulder. Uh, I can't wait to dive in myself, Ian, and please come back again. It's been so great to listen to you, and I'm a big Adam Carolla fan. I mean, that was such a great discussion there. I know you sat down with Greg Jennings on the set. Which Greg Jennings, one note on him, because he obviously caught a lot of shit when I wrote that story at Bleacher Report. All he did, and I think you told It was kind of funny, actually. You told Greg, I tried to reach out to you. You didn't pick up your phone. It was like a different experience for me because he was at an airport and like I could hear everything in the background. He like gets onto the plane, he's sitting on his seat, and he doesn't hang up until the plane is like literally taking off. Like he wanted to talk about Aaron Rodgers and wanted to answer my questions, and he he does have opinions all over. I think it's a complex
Yeah, but
conversation to
can I say
have.
one thing about that? Is I was
Yeah,
trying to get across to him is like 93% of the things you've said over the years about Aaron Rodgers was positive.
right.
We're positive. But I said the 7% that you said that to Tyler and maybe when he went to Minnesota, I respect that. You're a distinguished NFL player. Without you, Aaron has no rings because of the way you played in that Super Bowl was amazing. And you have a right to express your opinion about him, just like he's got a right to say negative things about other people. So I was actually getting the message through a publicist at Fox. Like I wasn't looking to rip him because he ripped Aaron Rodgers. I respected that he put his name on it, and with you, right?
Hmm.
Uh, and I had no problem with his criticism. I just wanted to explore it more and also talk about the positives too that he had expressed about his quarterback. So it was frustrating that I did not have a major problem with him at all, and I think he feared that. Oh, here's another guy who just wants to criticize me for what I said about Aaron. No, no, you have a right. You were a very distinguished NFL player who had the right to speak your truth, just like he does. And so that frustrated me that I couldn't make that connection with him. And that's okay. That's the way it goes. And you put out as many requests as humanly possible, and you hope for a good return. I would say this book, I did have more non-return messages than even for Belichick, and it got better later in the process, I think. But that was a frustrating part of it.
That's interesting. I wonder if this is where you take it to the next level. Is that Aaron kind of like covering his bases, or people close to Aaron not wanting to be, sent to the island, even if it's
Yeah,
inadvertent, right? Like even in fear of
definitely.
I want to say nice things, but one line could be misinterpreted by Aaron, and I'm going to end up out there, and I just want to avoid this.
What one friend in particular told me that he said I didn't want to get sentenced to the island, and I wanted to help you. I thought you were doing it the right way, but I was like, what if he exactly what you said? And that those were the same words that came out of his mouth. And he's like, it wasn't worth the gamble. And then after he read the book, he said, I wish I talked to you because I could tell now you didn't have an agenda, and I probably would have been safe. But in any event, that is the sentiment that I ran into quite a bit.
Ian, you're the man. Thank you so much for hanging out with us here. Everybody out there, get the book Out of the Darkness: The Mystery of Aaron Rodgers.
And thank you so much for informing my book with your excellent work on Rodgers and the Packers. And thanks for having me, Tyler.
You got it, Ian.